G'day and welcome to Space Engineers. This is part one of a tutorial series where I'll do my very best to help smooth out the learning cliff that Space Engineers has. To begin with, we're obviously going to click on New Game, and then we're going to be met with a whole raft of options. The option that I would recommend basically every player start with is the first jump. This will teach those unfamiliar the basic controls, but it'll also teach you some of the basic interaction controls and mechanisms that Space Engineers has, from how to interact with the blocks and things like that. But it does so in quite an interesting and well-scripted scenario. Once you're finished with the first jump, come back here, and instead of clicking on Learning to Survive, I would skip over that and go straight to Custom Game. The reason for that is the Learning to Survive scenario, while intended as a tutorial, can lead you down paths where you get stuck. And my goal here is to prevent you from getting frustrated so that you can experience the fun in Space Engineers, so we're going to skip over it entirely. Go to Custom Game, scroll down and find Star System. This is your blank slate scenario where you start with next to nothing and build it up into whatever you want it to be. Before we click Start, we're going to go to Advanced and change one option. We're going to turn off the weather system. So we're going to uncheck the Enable Weather System checkbox. The reason this is important is that the way lightning and lightning damage is implemented is very unfriendly to new players, so we're just going to avoid it entirely. Now, with that done, we can click Start. Wait for the game to load, and then we'll be met with our spawn options. There are a whole bunch here, and the one that I would recommend for new players is the Earth-like drop pod. While the relatively high gravity does add some challenge to the engineering, the abundance of oxygen means you have more time to think, and that is definitely a benefit when you're starting out. So we're going to select Earth-like drop pod, and then we click Respawn. And we'll find ourselves spinning in a drop pod, falling to the planet, waiting for our parachute to deploy. While we're waiting for that parachute to deploy, we can have a bit of a look around. Press V, hold down Alt, and then use the scroll wheel and the mouse to look around. We can see that we're landing somewhat near an ice lake. We're in a nice green area with some rolling hills, some mountains in the distance. It's a pretty good landing spot, as long as that sun is rising, not setting. So, let's have a bit of a look at what's in our drop pod. First of all, the inventory. Press I. Oh, hopefully this rolls and lands right way up eventually. If we press I, we can have a look at what's in the seat. Inside our seat is a pistol, some magazines for that pistol, and a data pad with the location of a nearby trading station. We're not going to need that data pad just now, but we're going to transfer all of this to our inventory anyway, just so it's secure. So let's drag our pistol across, or we can double click to transfer a whole stack across to our inventory on the other side of this divider. And if we click on the cube icon, we will see all of the inventories on this ship or station, whether we can access the items from them or not, because this seat has no conveyor access. So we see in our O2H2 generator, we've got an oxygen bottle, a hydrogen bottle, and some ice, but we can't transfer these to anywhere because it's not conveyed to anywhere where we can transfer them to. You can see anything that it's not connected to when you click and drag because they will become darkened. But I really want that hydrogen bottle. So we're going to hop out, we're going to walk around to our left, and on this side of the pod, we'll see a large conveyor port, which is this yellow square area. If we interact with that, we can then grab our hydrogen bottle and drag it across. We want this hydrogen bottle now because it's going to refill the hydrogen supply in our suit, which is going to allow us to fly around for longer, which makes building much simpler. Your suit will automatically refill from this hydrogen bottle as long as there's hydrogen left in it whenever your suit gets low. We don't need the oxygen bottle because the planet has enough oxygen that we don't need that supply. And this ice will be used later for refilling these bottles or refilling our suit, because we can refill our suit from this survival kit that's around here. Not from the inventory access port here, but from this blue screen here. This blue screen here is able to heal us. It's also able to recharge our suit. And if the survival kit is connected to something that can supply hydrogen and oxygen via its conveyor system, it can also refill those. Say for example, if I were to fly up here and then fall down and hurt myself a little bit, you can see that I've used up a little bit of hydrogen. Health is at 97, power at 97, and hydrogen at 98. If I hold down interact with this, and now I'm back at 100 for everything across the board. This survival kit is connected to our O2H2 generator by these two little conveyors that you can see behind my seat here. If I walk back around to the access port of the survival kit, I can try and move this bottle, but again, I'm stopped. But there's a conveyor there. That's because that conveyor is too small to move things like oxygen bottles and a lot of the components that we'll build. It can, however, be used for moving things that are much smaller than that, or can be moved in much smaller portions, such as the ice, which I can move across. Last thing to look at on our pod is our battery. Our battery here comes with 100% charge when we start falling down with it. If I hop in the seat, press K to bring up the control panel, and click on the battery, you can see that it has 993 kilowatt hours left. At the moment, that is absolutely fine, because it won't deplete for a full 2 days. That's 48 hours in our real world time, not 48 hours game time, 48 hours real world. All of your timers that you'll see for power depletion are in real world amounts. 2 days is a very long time, but it's not really going to last 2 days. The most power hungry thing on our respawn pod here is the survival kit. The survival kit, while at idle, will require 15 kilowatts of power. That's in order to be able to respawn at it, as long as it has power. So we want to make sure that this survival kit has power always. We never want it to run out. So that's going to be our first goal. We want to get a power source that's not going to run out and that's going to be simple to manage. And the best power source for that, given that we are on a planet with atmosphere, is going to be a wind turbine. Because wind turbines, unlike solar panels, can operate throughout the day and night. And having power throughout the night early on means we don't need any power storage device for the power we're generating. But wind turbines do have a couple of downsides. The main one being they must be on what we call a static grid, which is anything that is locked to voxels, because voxels, like the planet I'm on, like asteroids, moons, they are all completely 100% immovable objects in Space Engineers. You can destroy them, but you cannot move them. And a wind turbine must be locked to that. It also only comes in one size, which is large. Our pod is small size. If we try and place a wind turbine on our small grid, it will say, large ship wind turbine is not available for small ship. In order to build a wind turbine, we're going to need some materials. You can see on the right there is a list of materials required for this, which are interior plates, motors, construction components, girders, and computers. And then some more interior plate. To collect those materials, we're going to go mining. And I'm going to walk around to where the inventory access point is for my survival kit, and I'm going to mine near that, because that's where I'm going to be dropping these materials off, so I may as well make my journey as short as possible. In order to mine, we're going to pull out our drill on number 3, and there are 2 modes we can use with this drill. The mode we're going to use first is right-click. When we right-click, we destroy a larger area of voxel. If we crouch down, we can start digging down into the ground. This is a useful mode for getting toward a resource because it destroys a larger area, even though it doesn't actually give you any resources. If we want to collect resources, we need to left-click. And if we want to be able to see, we want to press L to turn our lights on. So if I were to left-click on this dirt here, some stone will pop out. You can see that we got 96.2 plus 3.2, so 99.4 kilos of stone from that dirt. If I keep mining downwards, we're eventually going to run into some rock. And that rock is going to drop a lot more stone for us than the dirt does. So we'll keep digging down. In some regions of the planet, this topsoil will be very thick, and you may have to mine down a fair way, but because of the massive difference in material load that you get from each bit you mine, it's well worth the effort. And here we go, we've run into some rock, and now if I left click mine into this, you'll see that there's 329 plus 128 for the same amount of drilling that I did in the stone to just get 99. So substantially more effective. Yes, I am going to have to walk all the way back up this tunnel in order to get to my pod, but I still think overall it's going to be much quicker to mine this way. And you might get luckier and not have to dig quite so deep to get down to the rock. And once our inventory is full, let's head back up to the survival kit and drop this off so it can start to be processed. Back at our survival kit, interact with the inventory port, and we can transfer our stone across. This can be done in a few different ways. We can click and drag it across like we did before with the other materials, or we can double click it to transfer as much as will fit, or we can do a couple of other things. There are a few modifier keys that work for making stacks as well as transferring stacks in Space Engineers. If we control click, we will transfer 10. If we shift click, we will transfer 100. And if we control shift click, we'll transfer 1000. For dropping off stone, there's a little shortcut that I want to show you. In the middle of our screen, we can see this button. It says deposit all ores, ingots, and components. We could use that button to transfer things across, but that button also gives us a little tooltip or a shortcut, which is Alt middle mouse. Now, Alt middle mouse doesn't work in this screen. Alt middle mouse works without opening up that screen at all. So if I hold down Alt and then middle mouse, I'll drop that stone into any inventories that are available connected to this inventory access port. So if I open this up, we'll see that I've put some stone in the survival kit, but I've also put some stone in the connected small cargo container. So that's going to be really handy for dropping our stone off. But it's not any good having the stone in the survival kit if we haven't told the survival kit to process it. So we're going to switch over to the production tab, and then we'll be met with this screen where we've got on the left here a bunch of tabs, ingots, components, equipment, tools, weapons, ammo. The survival kit has a limited selection of each of these things, and the one we want to look at right now is the ingots. We want to be able to produce ingots from stone, so we want to add this to our production queue. We can add it one at a time, or just like when we were transferring our stone across, we can use Control to do 10, Shift to do 100, or Control Shift to do 1000. And I'm going to add up a whole bunch to this, just so that anytime I put stone in here, the survival kit will process it without me having to interact with it. It doesn't matter if these don't all get used, they'll be ignored for whatever's next in the queue if the materials aren't available. So that's going to start processing our stone. I'm going to go down in my mining hole and I'm going to dig up at least another 2 loads of stone, as that will give us enough materials to build our first wind turbine. While we're down here mining, hold down the F key while you are mining and it will pick up a lot of the stones as they drop, so we don't have to pick them up at the end. Looking at our HUD there, you can see now that that bar across the top is all red. That means that our inventory is full. That is if you haven't got the audio cue telling you that your inventory is full. Your inventory is full. Your inventory is full. To build this wind turbine, I want to make sure that it has enough clearance around it that the wind can get to the wind turbine properly. The game checks this by seeing if there's any obstructions around it horizontally, as well as how far it is from the voxel, i.e. the stuff that I'm standing on, below the wind turbine. We want to make sure that we're at least 20 meters clear in all of those directions. To place down our wind turbine, we're going to want to build a tower. So let's build some steel plate so we can place down some armor blocks to make up that tower. I'm going to make 10 of them. Then I'm going to switch over to the inventory screen and double click on these to transfer. Now that we've got the materials, we can start building our tower. And to build that, I'm going to use my armor block. If I press 4, I'll get access to this armor cube, and I can place it anywhere around here. If I were to place it above the ground like this, it's going to fall, and that is going to be what Space Engineers considers to be a mobile grid. Let's grind that down because that's not going to be helpful. Instead, what we want is something that's locked to the voxel, because that will be static, and therefore the wind turbine can work, because it needs a static grid. So we're going to lock this down, and to do that, we're going to make sure that when we place it, it's intersecting with the ground. To ensure that this is aligned to gravity as well, we can press B, and we'll see that gravity aligned placement mode is activated. If you see a different thing, like local grid alignment mode is activated, keep pressing B until gravity align comes back. And then we can left click and place our first block. Keep placing them on top of each other, making sure that they've snapped to one another, because placing a block like this is not helpful. This block is not connected to the one below it. And that means nothing can pass between those two, so we'll grind that down again and start placing some more on top until we run out of steel plate. So now we've got a tower that's 9.5 blocks tall, which will be enough for our wind turbine. And in order to place our wind turbine, we can bring it up again and look at the component list on the right. The component that's at the very bottom of that list is the component we need in order to be able to place our wind turbine. So I need to go back to my survival kit and build some interior plate. And let's order up 10 by control clicking. And once they've been built, we'll fly up to the top and place our turbine. Just like with the armor blocks, making sure this is snapping to the top like so, and then left click to place. And then we can grab our welder out and it will place in every component we are holding that is needed for this block. So we're currently holding 9 interior plate. If I start welding, you'll see that we now have 10 interior plate in this wind turbine. So now we can go back to our survival kit and make the remaining components. That's some motors, construction components, girders, and computers. So if we go to production, and I remember we needed 8 motors, and I can't remember anything else. So Let's click on 7 and see what else we need. 20 construction components. Production, 20. We also need 24 girders and 2 computers. It also says we need 30 interior plate. But we're not going to make that just yet, because it's not strictly required to get a functional wind turbine. And that's going to save us a moderate amount of material. If you're feeling impatient while these components are being made, it's a good opportunity to go back down into your mining hole and collect some more stone, as we'll be needing that for our next stages. Okay, components are complete. Back to inventory and we'll transfer all these across. Double clicking on each one, and then fly back up to our wind turbine. When we have our welder out and we're looking at the wind turbine, you can see that on the right there is a line, a blue line that says functional above and hack below. If the block has a functional line and we reach that, that means that the block is functional even without the remaining components in it. And in the case of the wind turbine, those 30 interior plate, they fall above the functional line. So we have now got a wind turbine, which means we've now got a power source. But because I have no way to interact with this grid, I have no idea how much power that is producing, but we will find that out shortly. The next thing I want to build is a refinery. At the moment we're using our survival kit to produce ingots, but I prefer to have a refinery produce ingots because 1, it'll use power from the wind turbine, but 2, it'll be able to refine more than stone. And that can be very, very handy to us when we want to produce more stuff. As I want to build a refinery, I'd like to have a little bit of a platform connected to my tower. Now I could go back down into the mining hole and collect some more stone, get the survival kit to process it, and you then use those materials to produce more steel plate so we can make more of a platform. Or I can use the steel plate that the pod is made of. If we take out our grinder on number 2, we can then start grinding down these blocks. And that's because in Space Engineers, you get back everything you put into a block, with one exception: the power cells that are in batteries. If you were to grind down this battery, and you ground down those power cells, you'll get back scrap instead of power cells. So be careful while grinding things around your pod that you don't grind down this battery. But around the front here, we're pretty safe to grind this down, so I'm going to collect a bunch of steel plate from the front of our pod. If we shave off this front section here, we'll end up with 20 steel plate, so I can build a little bit of a platform. I'm going to extend out this way a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 blocks, and then I'm going to add a little bit of a ramp. You can see on my hotbar that there's a little plus symbol on this cube. If I were to use my scroll wheel, I can change to different shapes of armor, or in the case of, say, our solar panel, I can change to different types of solar panel and to the wind turbines as well. So I'm going to place a ramp here so that I can walk up from this side. And then, with our remaining 10 steel plate, I'm going to place down a refinery. The refinery has 2 inventory access ports on opposite sides. It does not have one on the top, and it does not have one on the bottom. To be able to rotate the block like I am, you can see up in the top right that there's normally a little indicator here saying which control is used for rotating in which direction. I'm going to place this down, make sure it's snapped, and make sure it's rotated so that the inventory access is going left to right. And that's just to make it easier for placing down the future blocks that I plan to have placed down after this. Left click, grab out our welder, weld in the remaining steel plate that we're carrying, and then we'll see that we need to get 90 steel plate, 20 construction components, 10 motors, and 10 computers. Go over to our survival kit and we'll order that up. Just like before, that top 20 steel plate for the basic refinery, that isn't required to reach the functional state for the refinery, so we're going to skip it as well. This is just to save us material early on. It does leave those blocks a bit more vulnerable to being broken. Say if we were to accidentally run into them, they can't take as much damage because they don't have all those components to protect them. If we move back over to our production window here, you can see in the middle we have a list of required materials and available materials. We can ignore the stone because we queued that up just so that it would process without us thinking about it. But if we look down to the iron, we can see that we still need 656 kilograms of iron and we have none left. We also need 16.67 kilos of nickel and we've only got 13 kilos left. Thankfully, stone will give us both of those materials. So we'll grab out our drill and we'll head back down in the mine. So back across in my production window, and you can see that I now have enough iron and enough nickel. If I want to get my components built first rather than processing this stone, I can click and drag it so that it moves to the end of the queue. That way the components will be made first because we have the materials for them, and then that stone will be refined once they're all made. Alrighty, everything's made. We're back to processing the stone. Let's transfer this across. As you can see, like the wind turbine, it's got that functional hack line, which we should reach with these components. Don't worry too much about building the other bits or not. If you build them, that's fine. I'm just trying to save a little bit of time for you to begin with. Once the refinery is built, you'll notice this thing on the screen that says, by building basic refinery, you have unlocked new blocks. Before we get to using the refinery, let's take a look at what that means. If we open up our block menu by pressing G, you'll see that there are a whole bunch of blocks you can build. But there are blocks in Space Engineers that you can't build yet. And if we look at our progression tab, you can see what's required in order to unlock them. Let's take as an example the parachute block. The parachute block is shown here in our progression list. If we click back across to blocks, you'll see that I cannot build it yet. That's why it's in this grayed out area here. In order to unlock the ability to build a parachute, we need to first build a landing gear. So if I walk over to my survival pod, hop up on top, where there's a parachute block, and grind it down below that functional line, and try and weld it up, it's going to say unknown technology. So to research that technology, we could place down a landing gear on our ship. Or we can go to an existing landing gear, grind it down below functional, and weld it back up again. We already knew how to build landing gear, so that's why that's able to be used by us. And now, if I head back up to the top, because we have unlocked the parachute block, as it shows up now in blocks, we can walk up to our parachute block and weld it up. So that's how we're going to unlock the ability to build more blocks. Like with the basic refinery, we can build it from scratch, or if it already exists on our respawn pod, we can grind it down below functional and weld it back up, and that'll unlock things further. Just make sure if you're using that grind down and rebuild technique, it's a block you can already build, because that's how the unlock system works. Build the things you can to unlock more things you can't. Now, this basic refinery, it allows us to access the control panel of this grid, either through our inventory access port and then changing over to control panel, or by going to this little blue screen here and interacting with it directly. Here you can see that our basic refinery is in a list with our wind turbine. If you don't see both of these blocks when you do this, it means you didn't snap the blocks as you went along in order to make sure this was all connected as a single grid. And that means that you can't use the wind turbine to power your refinery. Our basic refinery needs 330 kilowatts to operate properly. Our wind turbine can produce a max output of 420.95 kilowatts in the position we placed it. Currently it's only putting out 1 kilowatt because that's all the basic refinery needs when it's idle. If I were to switch this off, it now needs 0, and the wind turbine will say current output 0. Turn it back on, and let's go collect some stone. Just as a little test, let's put 1,000 stone in the basic refinery and see how much we get from that. And we'll also put 1,000 into our survival kit. Basic refinery should be done with that stone, and it has produced 21 kilograms of iron, some nickel, and some silicon. The survival kit, on the other hand, has produced 30 kilos of iron. So the basic refinery is actually worse at stone than the survival kit. While our basic refinery is worse at producing materials from stone than our survival kit is, at least in terms of the yield we get from each unit of stone, it can do things that the survival kit can't, and that's why we want to build it. It can refine ores. So we need to find some and see why refining ores is much better than refining stone, particularly when our only means of collecting any materials is using our hand drill. Our hand drill isn't just a drill. Our hand drill is also an ore detector, so we can use it to find ores around the place. There are 2 places on planets that you will find ores. One of them is things like this boulder over here that you'll see scattered around the place. They will contain small amounts of ore within them. There's another boulder just in the distance there. This contains iron, so that's useful for me right now. But I'd also like to show you how to find the other ores around here. If we turn on our jetpack, it's going to be much clearer where these spots are. Because ore is not just found anywhere. It's found in specific locations that on the vanilla planets are marked by discolored patches that we can see, that have a particular sort of shape. If I fly up high enough, these shapes become a little bit more apparent. We can see on our screen right now, there's a patch in the top right, there's a patch over to our left, which are pretty subtle, but once you get used to identifying them, you'll be able to see them everywhere. To make it easier for you guys to begin with, let's look at this ice lake, because this has much easier spots to see. The majority of the thing is blue, except for these dark grey patches. Those are ore deposits. So let's fly over to them and see what they contain. While I fly over there, on screen I'm going to show you a bunch of different ore markings on a bunch of different surfaces so you can see what they look like and gradually learn what it is you're looking for. Now that I've landed here, I can see that there is ice here. Not surprising, I'm on an ice lake. But I can also see nickel and magnesium. And if I keep walking around, I also see silicon. So there's magnesium, silicon, and nickel in this deposit. I want to make sure that I don't search this deposit again, and I also want to know that I can come back here and collect those later when I need them. So I'm going to create a GPS marker. Press K, change over to the GPS tab, and click New from Current Position. That will create a GPS marker exactly where I am standing. And I'm going to rename this to magnesium, nickel, and silicon. And now I'll fly to the next ore marking. There's one just here, let's see what it's got. And on this one, I found gold. Typically there's more than one thing in each deposit, but our ore detector of our drill only has a limited range, so we may not be able to see the other things that are deep beneath the ice. So since this is gold, we're going to create another GPS, new from current position, and call it gold. While I'm out here flying around, it's important to make sure that my hydrogen bottle still has fuel in it. Otherwise, I'm going to be taking a very long walk home. The main ores that I am looking for early on are iron and cobalt. Iron, so our basic refinery can produce iron quickly, because iron is used for most things in Space Engineers. And cobalt, because there are some specific blocks that we want to build soon that need cobalt, and we have no cobalt at this time. So I've only spotted iron in this one.
Energy
Another way to
low.
create a quick GPS is to open up our chat menu with enter, type /GPS, then space, then the name of the GPS you want to create, and it'll create a GPS exactly where I was standing with that name. And here we go. Iron, nickel, and cobalt in this deposit. Since there's iron here, I'm going to collect some of that first. Walk over near where the marking is, crouch, right click, start drilling downward, and we'll collect that so that we can build our next blocks using the iron from the iron ore. There we go. In amongst the iron, let's drill some of that with left click. When you're drilling an ore deposit, you will probably pick up some of the stone, or in this case the ice, around the area. Since we just want the ore, we can open up our inventory, grab the ice or the stone, and either drag it to this drop item bit, or just drag it off the screen, and it'll drop out of our inventory so we can grab the ore instead.
Full.
And now I've got a full inventory of ore. Let's drop our iron in here, and now with that processing you can see we're getting a lot more iron. That iron we brought back has produced over 1,000 kilos of iron ingots, which is perfect because the next block we want to build needs a lot of steel plate, just like the refinery did. And that block is the basic assembler on number 5 here. The basic assembler only has a single cargo access port, which means we want to make sure that that is connected to our basic refinery, so anything that our basic refinery produces can be utilized by the basic assembler automatically. To be able to place down the basic assembler, we're going to need a steel plate. So let's take that iron we pulled out of the refinery over to our survival kit and use it to make a few steel plate. Go to our production window and let's make 60 steel plate. The reason for 60, if we look at our basic assembler, we need 60 to get it started. Don't need to wait for all of that to be made. Let's just grab what's been made so far and we'll place down our basic assembler. We can see that there's a conveyor port here on the basic refinery, so I'm going to line this up, rotate that way. I can see, while it's set up this block higher, that I have the port in the correct orientation. Move it down, left click to place, and then use our welder to add those remaining steel plate we picked up. And in the time it's taken to do that, the survival kit has probably produced the rest of the steel plate we need. We also need to make 40 construction components, 10 motors, 4 displays, and 80 computers. Let's order them up as well. And if at this point you think, surely there's an easier way to do all this ordering up. There is, and I've got a tutorial that covers all those shortcuts, which I've linked up above. While that's producing those components, I'm going to go mine some more iron. Now I found some iron very, very close in this boulder, so I'm going to use that instead. And now that I've collected a few loads of ore, the survival kit is almost done producing these components, and now I can collect them out and build our basic assembler. And just like the refinery, this is also going to unlock some new blocks. The reason we built the basic assembler is that it can build more and do it more quickly than the survival kit can. The survival kit couldn't make things like steel tubes, medical components, and metal grids, nor can it make power cells, which we would need to make things like batteries. So now that we've got that basic assembler, I'm actually going to collect all the materials out of my survival kit and transfer them across. So we'll grab all our iron, nickel, and silicon. Gravel doesn't really service any purpose at the moment, so I'm going to throw it on the ground. To do so, I need to transfer it first across to my personal inventory, and then either drag it onto the drop or drag it off screen, just like with the stone when we're collecting the iron. Take this back across, access the inventory of this grid through the basic refinery, and select the assembler's ingot inventory, which is the top one. And then we can transfer this across. We can't transfer this to the bottom one. I can double click on that all I like, and it will not go there, but it will go to this top one. Transfer them to there, and now the assembler is ready to produce things. But what do we want to produce next? The next thing I want to produce is more power, because that wind turbine is not producing enough for both of these blocks. If we go to our control panel, we'll see that the basic assembler requires up to 280 kilowatts, the basic refinery 330, so that's 610 total. But our wind turbine only puts out 420, so we need at least one more so that we could power them both at the same time. And that's important because later on we're going to be moving our survival kit onto here, so we want to make sure that we've always got enough power to have everything on and everything running at full capacity. Because if we don't, we could get in a situation where our survival kit lacks power. That would be bad. So to build more wind turbines, I'm going to add them to this tower. So let's go into our basic refinery, switch over to production, make some interior plate, and we'll place some more. You can see how much quicker that is to produce than it was with the survival kit. With our wind turbine out, we can see that this takes up quite a lot of area. If I want to place a whole bunch of these around here, I might need some extra plate to make them fit. I'm also going to get some steel plate. Like 10 of that as well. By getting those steel plate, I can now create enough room that not only could I place the wind turbine here and here, if I remove those and place down 4 blocks like so, I can now place wind turbines all the way around, because the wind turbine occupies a space 3 by 3 by 3 cubes. So this top one would block me from placing it here, so I need to move it down, and then by putting these, I've spaced them out enough that they can all fit.
Fuel
My jetpack
low.
fuel is also low, so let's deal with that before we weld those up. I can walk down to my survival kit and fill up my suit. So my suit is now at 100%, but I would also like to fill my bottle. To fill my bottle, drop it into the O2H2 generator. Because it's got some ice, it will then automatically fill up my hydrogen bottle. I can then bring it back, and I'm all fueled up. And let's build the components we need for these wind turbines. Just like before, I've used the list that I can see on the right when I've got this selected in order to order up exactly the right components. Nearly all of the components are made, but because I haven't yet finished making any of the wind turbines, the refinery and the assembler are not running so nicely right now. So, as soon as I can get these built, these should both run okay. So we'll grab out some of these components while they're being still made, and my inventory's full. So I'll go up and weld what I can, and then come back down and collect some more. Here we go. With this one completed, that's an extra 4 wind turbines on my base. If we have a look into our control panel, we can see how efficient or not those wind turbines are. Our first one is still optimally efficient at 420 kilowatts of output. Number 2, 389. Number 3, 337. Number 4, 326. And number 5, 370. So 2 of these only say good. Now I could have tried to make all of these absolutely perfectly optimal by making sure that that extra row that I built was built a little bit higher to clear these from the voxel by their desired minimal amount. But I'm still getting a lot of power output from these. The total output from these is about 1.8 megawatts. So it's quite a lot. So I'm not really worried about doing this perfectly optimally. But if you want to, make sure that you build the center of the tower a little bit taller than it needs so that those ones that go around the outside can be optimal. In this case, it was useful for illustrating that the output is reduced if they are a little bit closer to the ground. So now we have more than enough power for both the basic assembler and refinery, which means we can now operate both of them at the same time. The next thing I'd like to add to this base is some storage. To add some storage, we're going to alter our hotbar. In Space Engineers with Keyboard, you've got a whole bunch of different hotbars which are accessible by pressing Control and then the number, as you can see on my HUD. But we're going to clear up our first hotbar a little bit. We're going to press G, and we're not going to be building another basic assembler, so I'm going to right click and remove that. And then I'm going to find cargo containers. If I type cargo up here, you'll see that there are 5 options that come up: cargo crates, industrial cargo containers, small cargo containers, large and medium. This one has a little plus on it, so that's the one we're going to select. We can either click and drag and move it onto the empty slot, or we can double click on it for it to go to the first empty slot starting at the left. We want the one with the plus on it because it allows us to choose which size of cargo container we want to build. On large grid, we have a small and a large. If we change to small grid by pressing the number again, we have large, small, and medium. Medium is not available for large grid. So if we want to change back to a large grid version of things, we need to change to a block that has that grid size available to it. So in this case, large cargo container, we can switch back, and then we can switch to the small cargo container. If at any stage you see blocks like this large industrial cargo container, and you see it in the G menu where it has a little symbol like this, that means it's part of one of the DLCs. They're entirely decorative. They don't add any functions to the base game. The little image will tell you which DLC. If you look through the list, it'll have that little image in its thumbnail. In this case, I want to start off with a small cargo container. This needs interior plate, construction components, metal grids, small steel tubes, motors, and a few other things. But the important component there is metal grids. So if we go to our production menu again, we look at metal grid. This requires 4 kilos of iron, 1.67 kilos of nickel, and a kilo of cobalt, which we don't have. That's why we were scouting for cobalt earlier. So let's leave that menu and find out where our nearest cobalt is, which is 1.3 kilometers this way. There we go, there's the blue of the cobalt. Let's collect a bit of that before my power runs out. Get that cobalt refining. You can see in the refinery that there's 6 kilos of cobalt. In our production window, it shows that we don't have enough available. Assemblers will pull what they need as they need it. They don't tend to pull the materials ahead of time. So while this window is useful, it won't always tell you the full story about how many materials you have available to you. Okay, all the components are made. Let's grab those out. I'm going to do something a little bit odd here, just for the sake of demonstration, and I'm going to place down my cargo container here and weld it up, leaving a gap between the cargo container and the refinery. By building small cargo container, you have unlocked new blocks, which is handy because that helps me demonstrate the next thing. Cargo containers, when you build them, unlock the ability to build conveyors. And we're going to use a conveyor to connect the cargo container to the basic refinery. Because if we don't, we access the inventory in the cargo container, we can't grab anything from the basic assembler or the basic refinery, and similarly, we can't put something in the small cargo container and then move it to one of the others. To build a conveyor, we're going to access our G menu again, and we're going to remove the basic refinery and place down conveyors. I'm going to select the non-DLC one that is available for large grid. There's also this one, which is not available for large grid. As you can see on the right-hand side here, there are 2 symbols. This one is small grid, this one is large grid. In large grid, these are not available. So we want this one. We're going to drag it down, and then we're going to have a look at what we need to build a basic straight conveyor tube. So we'll get those ordered up. Let's first grab out our interior plate, and then we can place this conveyor tube down. With that conveyor tube placed, it is a little more difficult to access this inventory, but you can still access it. So we can access it and grab the remaining parts, and then weld this up. With that welded, we now have a connection between the cargo container and the basic assembler and refinery. So I can access the cargo container and pull materials into my personal inventory, and similarly put them into the basic refinery and assembler from my personal inventory. On this conveyor tube, you can see that it is functional and connected to both sides because it has this green light. It will be yellow if it is powered and not connected on one side. If I grind down this small cargo container, you can see that it is now yellow. That's because it is powered but not connected on both sides. Weld this back up when it goes green. And if it had no power, it would be red. And if it was damaged, it would be off. If you happen to place down the cargo container over here and tried to connect it, it would not connect because these are separate grids. So you would have to use a different means to connect them. So just as we checked to make sure that the refinery and the wind turbines were on the same grid, you can check that things are on the same grid by going to the control panel and ensuring that they are both in the list here. With that built, there's one job left to do, and that is to remove our survival kit from our respawn pod over to our base so that our survival kit can't lose power. I'm going to create a little bit more space for that by moving this ramp, putting down another pair of blocks and another ramp, and then we're going to add the survival kit to our hotbar. Remove the wind turbine, because the wind turbine is technically in 2 spots. Under the solar panel is also wind turbine. So we already had it on our hotbar, we just had it on there twice. I'm going to find the survival kit, which I can either scroll down and find, or type it in the search bar at the top, pop it on there, and we're going to place that down. You can see in our list on the right that the survival kit requires a new component that we haven't made before, medical components. If we go to our production window, these require silver. We don't have the means to refine silver. The basic refinery can only refine iron, nickel, silicon, cobalt, and magnesium ores. It can't refine silver, gold, uranium, or platinum. So, in order to build this survival kit, we're going to need to use the medical components from this one over here. The survival kit on large grid requires a few more steel plate than the one on small, so we're going to make a few of those first. Let's make 20, grab those out, weld them in, and then we can go grind down the one over here. Before we grind this down, make sure that your power reserves in your suit are adequate. Because if you grind this down and then run out of power before you weld it back up, you won't have a way to get power or to respawn, and you'll have to reload or restart. So let's get those medical components. Then walk up and weld our new one, and don't die in the meantime. And there we are, we have moved our survival kit across. Because we've moved it over to our new base, it can now only heal us and give us power. So if I run my hydrogen down a little bit, you can see when I access this screen on the survival kit, I only get power back and my hydrogen doesn't fill anymore. That's because this survival kit is not connected to any hydrogen source. But that's okay, because we've got our O2H2 generator down here, and we can refill our bottles and use them to refill our suit. But we have now replaced the capabilities of these pod and expanded upon them by building the basic assembler, basic refinery, cargo container, and the survival kit here. If you've got any questions about anything that I've said today, or if you've got any additional tips you want to share with people who are just starting out, let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to answer any of the questions. And next time we will get on to building a mining ship so that we can collect the resources we need to build a proper assembler and a proper refinery. So there's all that and plenty more to come, and I will see you then.